Now, death holds both a fear and a fascination for Irish people, and my next guest says he can tell us what happens after we die. Now, some of you might find this a bit out there, but keep an open mind because it really is quite fascinating. Please welcome Colm Keane. Colm, how are you? Thank you very much. Colm, how are you?
Not too bad, doing fairly well.
Good, good. Listen, just before we talk about maybe what happens after you die, maybe just to establish where you're coming from and all this, and you're not crazy or anything. You're a fairly rational, normal human being, aren't you?
I can see it's going to be a long and difficult interview and a difficult night. I really can. Let me take you back a little, Brendan. I'll be very brief. About 5 years ago or 6 years ago, I started interviewing people who had temporarily died. You know, these are people who had died for about 2, 3, 4 minutes following maybe a heart attack, a car crash, or near drowning, something like that. And they came back with these astonishing stories of what took place. Now, they weren't just astonishing, but they were also kind of categorized. They were uniform, you know, they were very similar really between all the different people. And I did a book, I did another book, collected an awful lot of people, well over 100 people that I've spoken to, went back through all the great sacred texts, you know, the Old Testament, New Testament, Quran, Torah, and so on, and also the big international reports and investigations and studies, and brought it all together. I could see a big pattern, and the bottom line literally is the 10 things that happen when you die, and that's the background to it.
Okay, and are you coming from a place of deep faith on this one, or?
No.
No.
I would be, I was born a Catholic and brought up a Catholic, but I wouldn't call myself a lapsed Catholic, but very lukewarm really in my religious beliefs. And that would go, you know, for an awful lot of the people in the book as well. I think people would presuppose that it's people from a religious, you know, background. But quite a number of the people I would have interviewed would be atheist or non-believers. They wouldn't even have the energy to be atheist in many cases. You know, no interest whatsoever in religion. So religion really has nothing to do with it. I'm a journalist, 35 years standing, academic, broadcaster or whatever. That's my background.
Yeah, okay. Now, so we won't go through the whole 10, but there's a pattern here that does seem to be repeated across a lot of the people who claim these experiences, right? And some of it we'll be more familiar with because they've almost become kind of part of the culture. For example, the notion that people hover above themselves initially in the hospital room or above the accident or whatever, and that they seem to be looking down on their physical body.
Yeah, that's a very important stage, the very first stage really after somebody passes away. The whole idea is that something departs the body. They all report this, be it the soul, the spirit, the mind, the consciousness, call it what you will. It doesn't really matter, probably one and the same thing. But it departs the body and they're up above and they're looking down at the scene below. It could be the operating theatre, it could be a car crash, scene of the car crash or whatever. The critical thing about that stage is that people feel very happy, they feel very warm, very at peace, very comfortable. Doesn't matter how bad the situation down below is. I mean, it could be, and I can think of 2, 3 people actually in the book who've been involved in car crashes, despite the fact that they're mangled down below. And one person, I mean, even describing the last image he had was the wheel of a car coming through the windscreen. You know, you can imagine the damage that did. But they feel calm and at peace, wonderfully so. And then they sort of turn around and face in the opposite direction, head off through this tunnel and off towards a light.
Okay, so the tunnel and the light, and another kind of common thing. And then when they get up the tunnel, is it at some point, you see, some of this is kind of, you could think is kind of vague, or it's an allegory for something or whatever, that, you know, and we're conditioned to see a tunnel and light. But some of it's quite specific, like that people then at this point, a lot of them meet their relations who are dead or friends who are dead and stuff, don't they?
Yeah, they do. They come to a border or a boundary, and on the far side of the border or the boundary, they see deceased family or friends, you know, people that they used to know and love, like parents, brothers, sisters, children, and they're on the far side waiting them. They're really happy to see them, and the people on the other side are happy to see them arriving too. What's very interesting about it is that they never hug each other, they never touch each other. The border is always dividing them. They never cross over. There's one wonderful example of that, I suppose, a woman called Catherine from County Cork. She describes coming to this border, seeing her deceased parents, her deceased brother on the other side. She has her foot up, you know, she's moving along, and her leg is up, her foot is up. She's about to put it down. One more step, she knows, and if she takes it to go across to the people she desperately wants to go to them, she's gone. And she knows she's gone.
She knows this,
and,
right.
and she wouldn't be talking to me because she wouldn't have come back.
And the relations often kind of send them back, don't they, or about say it's not your time and
yeah,
beckon them to
and
go back.
that is absolutely, and that is quite remarkable as well. It's almost always the same phrase. Everybody tells me this internationally as well.
Yeah.
It's not your time, go back. And it would normally be the relations, not always. It could be the supreme being that we might come to in a moment or whatever.
So this is so that's, I guess, another step, and this will probably stretch people's credulity a little bit more, is that people actually, well, meet God. A lot of them report meeting God, yes?
Yeah, and again, what's important, when they talk to me about this, they talk about a being. You know, they seldom use the word God. They seldom even talk about like Jesus Christ or anything like that. They talk about a being, a superior being, a supreme being, a being of light. They know that it's kind, compassionate, knowledgeable, understanding. They want to be with it. They know it's in the light. I know it's incredible to be talking like this,
because
but this is the truth.
Because they actually, people describe it as a person oftentimes. You know, he was wearing coloured clothes, or sometimes in a monk's habit, isn't it?
Yeah, they have different interpretations. Now, I must admit, I think that's, you've got to remember the journey we talked about is where something leaves the physical body and it moves away. So it really is a different world, a different dimension that we're talking about. It's more kind of sense-driven, emotion-driven. So it's not all about, you know, robes or whatever. I think they're interpreting this God that they see, this being, and giving it a kind of a physical description. That's really what's happening there.
Okay, now, so far so good, and it's all quite blissful, isn't it? People want to stay there. I mean, there's one woman starts bargaining with God, saying, I want to stay and I want to come and bring the family, and he's like, no, you have to go back. But the bit that I kind of have to admit I didn't like the sound of was there is then a lot of people report a judgment, which sounds a bit rough in a way.
Yeah,
How
the
does that
judgment
work?
the judgment is terribly interesting. I call it a judgment in the book. I probably should have called it a life review, because it really is a review of your past life. A bit like what you read in the Bible, slightly different though. You go back through a kaleidoscope of images, you know, good and bad things that happened in your life. You relive them in real time, as if they were happening once again. Now, one woman, a woman from Limerick, told me a story. She had a problem with a baby, you know, she hemorrhaged after she was at home, rushed into hospital. As she was being wheeled down a corridor, she went on this life review. She relived all these images, these scenes, and yet when she came to, she was still in the same corridor. You know, it all happens very fast. But I asked the people, you know, when there is this judgment, is it the supreme being that's there that judges them, or what? And they said, oh no, you judge yourself. Which I found really interesting. And then I went away and thought about it, and I thought, there's a problem here, because if I judge myself on my performance in the past week, I'd give myself 10 out of 10 for everything, 11 out of 10. And I went back to them and I said, look, are you sure about this, judging yourself? And they said, oh yeah, you're missing the point, Colm. You judge yourself through the eyes of the other people that you've impacted on. In other words, like if it's your son, your workmates or whatever, you see how you've behaved through their eyes. Much more difficult, much more onerous task.
I'm not looking forward to that.
No, nor would I be.
Colm, do you find people are very sceptical about this when you talk to them about it?
I think people are much more open about this now. They should be, by the way, open about it. I am certain that this is what happens when you pass away. I am 100%, I'm 100% sure of it. I can't, you know, we could go into scientific explanations or whatever, but they don't matter. It doesn't really matter what the cause, what the explanation or whatever. This is what's going to happen anyway when you pass away.
And
so
does it give you a great comfort then for you personally to think that's what's going to happen.
Oh, it does, yeah, absolutely. I would have been the sort of person who 5, 6 years ago would have, maybe like the vast majority of people, would have feared death. I wouldn't have spoken about it, wouldn't want to think about it, put it in the back burner and sort of something I'll deal with eventually when it happens. But now, I have no problem with the prospect of dying, no difficulty whatsoever. In fact, in a funny way, I would look at it, having done all this research, as a fabulous journey, a wonderful journey that we're all going to have to go on, me too.
Okay,
And
and of
you as
course
well.
you don't have the luxury that a lot of people might have of not kind of contemplating your mortality, because I remember when you were here last year, I was probably before the summer last year.
Yeah, you're right.
I didn't get the impression you were making a lot of plans into the future at that stage,
No,
were you?
that followed my initial research and my first couple of books on this. I had cancer. I developed throat and neck cancer, and I think it was only about 5 weeks before I was on the show that I had a major operation in my throat and my epiglottis. And before that, I had another operation on my neck. I had chemotherapy, radiotherapy, lost 7 stone. I had more chemotherapy. I had the works, really. And I was only given a 20% chance of surviving and an 80% chance of not making it. So it was really poor. But since I was on the show, maybe it's got something to do with being on the show, I don't know. But since I was on it, I literally, every time I've gone back to my consultant, he uses 2 great words, lovely to hear, no change. Not all clear, just no change. It's really great.
Okay. Yes. Now, as if that wasn't enough to have to bear from cancer, you also, of course, lost your son, Sean. Was it 7 years ago? It was around Christmas, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. You're absolutely right. It was the beginning of my research, actually. It began after the death of Sean. Sean was 20 years of age. He died on Christmas Day, 11:45 at night. He got cancer when he was 17, totally different from my cancer. And I really have some indelible memories, images that are seared on my brain from that. I always remember the first day, the day that we were told that Sean had cancer. We were brought into the room with the consultant. I was there. My wife, Una O'Hagan, who's a newsreader here in RTE, was there, and our son, Sean. And we were told that he had the cancer, spread to the lungs, and there was no chance. He wasn't going to survive. And he was there digging the nails of one hand into the palm of the other hand, under the table. I could see it, and I'll never, ever forget that. And I can remember on Christmas again, 2 days before he died, Una and I, we had to leave the hospital. We knew he was going to die, and we went out to a little coffee shop. It was Christmas time, a lot of celebrations going on, and we sat there and we had to talk to each other about funeral arrangements, and I'll never forget them. They're scraping the bottom of the barrel, really. They're the worst memories. The only good thing about those 2 memories, I'll never match them again. Nothing will ever again be as bad.
No matter what happens.
No matter what happens. Yeah. No, even my own cancer was a breeze by comparison with that, even though it was bad too.
Wow. I'd say it's very rough on a couple as well, is it, when something like that happens? Yeah,
it is. I had no idea what was going to happen to the 2 of us. We'd been through a really difficult time, and I can remember, we focused fully really on Sean. And I remember on the day of the funeral, I had no idea what was going to happen. We stood there at the grave, and I suddenly thought to myself when it was all over, does Una go one way? Do I go another way? Yeah. Do we go out and have a drink? What do we do? Do we split up? I literally had no idea.
Like our story is over now.
Our story is over because Sean was our one and only, our pride and joy. Yeah. And just at that moment when I was thinking about it, Una put her arm through my arm, and we turned around and we walked away, and we went on to become very, very close. It really brought us together.
That was it, and on you walked.
And on we walked literally from the graveyard. And do
you think then that Sean will be there for you?
Oh, I do. I'm for whatever reason, I kind of pinch myself when I'm saying this because it sounds outlandish, but everybody that I speak to again reports this, and I'm 100% sure I'm going to meet him again. And I really look forward to it, you know, to seeing him and to being with him again. It's one of the big attractions for me of whenever I die, I can approach it with relative ease. And you know, I know that I've often wondered, what would Sean talk to me about? What would he ask me, you know? And I was always the man who got the Munster final tickets and the Ireland tickets and brought him over to Manchester United and that. So it would be football with me, but above all, you know, the one thing, I wasn't a fool. You know, I could watch Sean at home, even though he'd be very close to me for the pocket money and for the tickets or whatever. The one question, the first question he'd ask me is, "How's Mum?"
Yeah,
and I'm sure of that.
Okay, well, listen, Colm, good luck with your health, and I hope that, it sounds an awful thing to say, but I hope you don't see Sean too soon, obviously.
Thank you very much.
The book is absolutely, it is fascinating stuff. It's called Heading for the Light, The 10 Things That Happen When You Die. Colm, thanks a million. Great to see you again.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Colm Keane, ladies and gentlemen. And that book, Heading to the Light, 10 Things That Happen When You Die, is available in shops now. A reminder now of